All right, everybody, this is part 2 of the camper build, and as promised, I'm going to be publishing this just about a week after my first one, which I hope to keep the pattern on, and we made a lot of progress. I kept it a little bit of suspense as to what are some of the major differences of this new camper will be. And for those that are looking at what you see now, that main difference is probably going to be obvious, and that is it's going to be a cab over. So, for those who don't know, guys, I apologize, my garage is pretty crowded right now. For those who don't know, a cab over is where what is typically the sleeping area, or in some cases a storage area, actually extends over the cab of the truck, which is this area right here that you see. So here's the tub, or what I call the tub. This would be the part that slides into the truck. I believe from the last video, the wings, these side pieces weren't attached, if I recall correctly. Those would extend over the bed rails. And then this portion that you see here, the truck cab, it would actually sit in here. This is probably obvious for most of you, but I'll just kind of cover that there. All right, so progress over the last week is, I hope I'm not mistaken on this, but the wings were attached, which I do not believe I had attached in the last video. And then I did finish the floor. That involved, when you guys saw the last video, I do recall lifting up I think I had all of the wood cut, but I was lifting up some of it. So all that wood has been attached to this, to the framing. And I just did that using 18 gauge brad nails and that caulking that I showed. That caulking has a real strong adhesive quality to it, so I'm not worried about this coming up. And between the use of the caulking and the nails, it should allow, there are some gaps in between these boards that should allow this wood to expand and contract with humidity. I do have to admit, in retrospect, I wish I would have kept the gaps a little bit bigger, but I think it will be fine, especially since it's going to be primarily on the indoors of the camper. And then the next big portion of the build, which has taken a lot of energy, is getting this cab over design and starting the initial framing of that. This has been a real point of a lot of thought on my behalf and a lot of work, and that is the profile, the exact size of the cab over and the exact profile. So because this is, it's both a form and function kind of thing. You know, for me, the cab over is going to be primarily a sleeping area, which so I had to ensure that it was big enough and tall enough for that. But then simultaneous to that, the bigger you make it, aerodynamics, just as in my first build, and weight is really one of the two deciding factors in this build. The bigger you make it, the more aerodynamic drag, the more weight. And frankly, I think huge cab overs are kind of ugly. So this was kind of the best compromise that I can come to. And I'm going to talk about, let me pull out a tape measure here and talk about some of the measurements of this cab over. And then I'm going to talk about kind of the genesis of my thought in terms of its actual shape, which was a real big point of discussion. So you guys can see the framing in here. This framing from here to here, the thickness of it is 2 inches, and this is going to be filled with polystyrene foam insulation. So if you can imagine, because you got to imagine that this is going to stop here. This is at the widest point about 56.5 inches, just a little under. And at the narrowest point, which is at the ends, and I'll talk about that angle in a second, it is about 51.25. Okay, so what that means, and then it's going to be about 79 inches wide. So what that means is a full-size mattress will fit up there, which is, I think, is a pretty good size. I will have to dog ear the corners because the corners actually come in. So let's move in. Sorry guys, let's move in and talk about the profile of this. So this is what the side profile will be, right? So this part will extend over the bed of the truck. And for my particular truck, which is a 2500 Silverado, the windshield, this is almost going to be just to the edge of the cab. And I have a, I apologize, I think it's called a crew cab. I have not a full door in the back, but the suicide door, I guess you can call it, that opens up backwards. If you had like a 4-door truck, your actually bed area or your cab area is actually going to be longer. But for mine, the front of this will be, almost level right where the windshield starts. But here's where I think the interesting look should come into play, and I'm very excited. Obviously, I'm still framing it up, so I haven't trimmed it smooth. You can see some wood sticking up there that won't be there, and some wood sticking up. Actually, the wood that you see, sorry guys for my finger here is for the part in the front. But anyways, so you can see the roof is going to have a nice sloping, subtle curve, and then the front wall of this, where's my finger here? The front wall of this is going to have a sloping up curve. That's 22.5 degrees. So I think that should be quite attractive. And then if you look at it from this angle, what you guys see is that the front of it has a straight area, and then it actually curves in at an angle up to this point. And then, now this is going to be harder to visualize, but just bear with me, and it'll come together as I get more of the framing done. This part is a little bit higher than this, so when the roof comes sloping down, it's going to angle toward the front. So I think it took a lot of thought and a lot of extra work, but I think it's really going to, because you're going to have really, let's see, so 1, 2, 3, 4 different changes in angle to kind of make the final profile of this cab over. And I think that's going to, at least I hope that's going to add some aerodynamic elements to it, but I think it's also going to really add a really unique and good looking profile, which I'm very excited about. I know it's probably a little hard to visualize in this video, but just trust me as it comes together. So let's talk about a tech tip here. And kind of where the construction process that I'm in with this now. It's the same ideas that I used in the other camper, but they're of even more relevance here. So before I go on, I want to make this caveat. I'm a garage tinkerer. I'm not an engineer by trade, by training, or anything. So I'm just basically speaking from my experience. Now I have talked to engineers about ideas. I've done some informal study, I suppose you could say, of engineering ideas. But I want to make it clear, I'm going to talk about some building techniques, but I'm not doing it as saying I am an engineer. But anyways, beyond that disclaimer, let's move on here. So when you guys build things, right? I've heard engineers tell me that an engineer, anybody, you could hypothetically build any building or any structure as strong as it possibly could just by overbuilding it. I think the classic example is the person who builds a workbench in their garage. They can make a really sturdy workbench, but it's really heavy, it takes up a lot of material, and they just overbuild it, meaning that they put in more materials and joinery and screws and other things that would technically need to be needed. And in some applications, such as a workbench, that's fine. That doesn't hurt anything. But when you're building more critical things, an automobile, an airplane, or in this case, a camper, where form, function, and weight are key considerations, we want to make this as lightweight as possible so it doesn't encumber the truck it's on. The form of it, we want it to look attractive and maybe have some other qualities, such as it having an aerodynamic profile. And finally, the function of it. We're working with small spaces here, and you want to maximize the amount of space that you have inside of the camper to have things like a bed, such as in this cab over, and so on. So when you're building something like this, just the idea of, well, we'll just overbuild it to be safe, is not really an option that you have if you want to build it in the most efficient fashion. So you have to try to use materials and building techniques. All right, sorry, I had a slight interruption, but what I was saying is you have to use building techniques and materials that are going to enhance the lightweightness of the project, the form of the project, and the function of it. And another important thing in terms of materials that was when I built this was I wanted to use materials that were off the shelf, so to speak. And what I mean by that is stuff that you can buy at a local home store. They're not specialty wood products, and I'm most specifically talking about the lumber aspect of it. But they're not specialty wood products that you can only get in certain regions of the country, or you would have to order from some specialized wood shop, but things that you could actually go to a home store like Lowe's and Home Depot, for example, and buy. So this right now, as you see it, is really just standard plywood, which I bought and you can get at just your standard home store. And then the cedar that's being used for this is just cedar wood planks, which is the dog-eared cedar wood planks, which is the same kind of planks that you would just buy for a wood fence. But anyways, let me finish this video off. I'll just kind of cut to the chase here. Let's talk about some of the one particular kind of building technique. So my woodworking experience prior to this has been in making furniture. And when I'm building this camper, in a lot of ways, I'm thinking of and building it in ways of if I were to be building a piece of furniture. So one of those is the concept of jointery. So as you guys can see in this joint right here, this is all cedar, and these cedar planks, when I plane them down, are about 1/2 inch. And so I have to laminate them, and that means that I need to glue individual pieces together. And that takes time. It takes a lot of extra effort. But what it does allow me and afford me to do is to create joints. So in this case, if you guys can imagine, so I have this piece that's coming up, and this is laminated, and this meets with this piece, which is going to be one of the support pieces that keeps this cab over upright over the truck, right? Because there's no external supports that are going to sit out there once this is finished. So what I did is I was able to laminate in a joint. This is a I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the joint name. I think this is a finger joint equivalently. But this piece right here, which extends over that, comes in here, and then these two pieces that are part of this laminated joint actually go around it. And then there's a real strong glue joint in here, and I did use some brad nails and other things. And the wood glue, if you use a good quality wood glue and the joint is appropriately spaced and clamped together, they say that the joint itself is actually stronger than the wood itself. So hypothetically, this L, right, that's made from that joint is as strong or stronger than if those two pieces of wood were just like you just bought that piece of wood in that L format. That's at least my understanding and frankly my experience. So I've incorporated these kinds of joints to do the building of this. So, and even though this one's like, here's another example. Even though this one, so this is the piece that goes up. This is the curved support piece for the cab over. Now this one I wasn't able to have a side piece, but you could still see it's glued here, here, and here. And you got to keep in mind, when you're doing glue joints, it all comes up to surface area. So the more surface area that you can incorporate into it, the stronger the joint's going to be. Here is a piece that I'm finishing up, and this is going to, roughly there, so you can kind of imagine, and this is going to form the frame that goes back into the rest of the camper area. And another advantage of laminating these together is it allows me to create these unique shapes that I use when attaching stuff. So, it takes a lot of forethought, but so in this case, this is going to sit in here. The cross piece, which is going to go over the top and form one of the roof trusses, I guess you could call it, or one of the roof supports, will actually fit down into this joint here. And then this joint is the piece, is that curved equivalent that's going to run across the top of this roof here. And it's a lot of extra work to laminate these, but then the cedar, and this just talks about the advantage, this piece, as you can see, I mean, look at this. I don't know what it weighs. It probably weighs 2 or 3 pounds, is going to be one of the main support structures for, you know, the skeleton, if you will, of the rest of the truck, which is really amazing. And it's small. It's only, this is only 2 inches and then by 2 inches. So it doesn't take up a lot of surface area inside the truck. Now, this frame in and of itself, you know, it's actually going to be very rigid. I've actually been very surprised so far how rigid this has become. But another component is the idea that one building step, so in this case, the skeleton, if you will, of the camper, is only one piece of its overall combined strength. The other combined strength comes from the incorporation of the other elements. So as you guys can see in the camper out there, the camper is skinned, as I like to say, with the planked boards over the skeleton. When you incorporate those, though that forms an exterior surface, it also provides a very strong and rigid exterior structure to the camper. And that's another thing to consider. So I'll end the video here, but I appreciate you guys watching. Again, try to tune in. I'll be posting these. I'm going to try for every week or two, depending on how things go. And, you know, comment, tell me what you guys think, ask questions, etc.